How the dice fell. Flint Daniels and the Nightmare in the Garden of the Stars. Part 2.
So yes, the players were driving their nuclear-powered hovercraft down a winding, dry creek bed through a ravine. And they got attacked from the various shadowed alcoves along the walls of the ravine by a bunch of gorilla-ons, those gorilla lion hybrid things that they found a bunch of dead ones of earlier. Of course, when I originally planned out this encounter, I didn't anticipate or account for the possibility that the party would have a nuclear-powered hovercraft. Because I didn't give them one, they just built it. So anyway, I came up with a new mechanic on the fly, and it actually worked out pretty well, I think. I don't know, John, would you agree? Worked out pretty well?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it did cause them to make tactically inferior
Yeah.
choices, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But they were interesting choices, and that's the important part. So yeah, I don't know how much you remember about how combat works in our Space Alert homebrew thing. You put down a bunch of cards that represent the zones that you're in. And the zones have colors. So when you want to attack, you have to draw a color of the correct that matches and place a card for that. There's like white, blue, red, and gray zones. Anything can attack. And also zones have cover. So inherently, some zones have more cover than others. And a zone with no cover, the enemies will preferentially attack. They'll always attack whatever zone. If there's a player in a zone with no cover, they'll attack that. So what I did was I put down zones for the ravine. It was basically a big long shooting gallery. And then I gave them a zone for the hovercraft, which was a no cover zone. And every turn, one of them, anyone who's in the hovercraft zone, could play a move card to move the hovercraft. And so the hovercraft was moving down the ravine, taking whoever was on it along with it. But the problem is it was a no cover zone. So
everyone gets shot there.
It's being riddled. And fortunately for the players, I didn't have a lot of area effect attacks on these guys. There was actually there were three types of baddies, I think. Four types. There was a commander, there were guys with guns, they were very similar. The commander was just a little tougher. And then there were rippers, which were these melee guys that would get in the zone with you and basically try and pull your arms off. They would do damage to you and force you to change weapons, which I thought was a fun mechanic. It never actually came up because, everyone was zooming along in the hovercraft. And then there were these suicide bomber guys that would try and get in the same zone as you and then blow themselves up. They had an area effect. And so I was really hoping one of those guys would manage to jump off of the cliff side onto the hovercraft. And then they'd have like a turn to frantically get this guy dead or something before he blew up. And
I mean, it did have its desired effect because like that's one thing that this combat sort of encourages is like panicking over like dangerous abilities that are coming that might happen. So
everyone really focused on those guys because they could jump in the hovercraft and blow themselves up, and that would have been really, really bad if that happened. But yeah, none of them got on the hovercraft. One almost did, but actually Chumley jumped off of the hovercraft to go and fight this guy, this suicide bomber, on the cliff face before he could jump into the hovercraft. And
it ended up not working out well because I think it was an accident. Like somehow
Chumley played a card and thought it was right. I think she played a card thinking it was an attack this zone thing, but it was actually a move to this zone thing.
Right,
I
and
think
just
that's what happened.
following the space alert feel of like mistakes. It's like, yeah, you did it. If it's possible, you do it, even if you don't want to, because
Yeah.
it's like it just whatever, like it. Maybe she was thrown from, or he was thrown from it, or whatever. But whatever.
Or he was just
But
really gung-ho and did a tactically poor choice that was like, wait a minute, I shouldn't have jumped off of the hovercraft.
well, it could be so Robin was getting really frustrated with the cards she was getting. So maybe Chumley was
Mm.
getting frustrated with no success. So he just finally jumped off. But it was really bad because the hovercraft kept moving, right? So he jumped off into one of these cliff holes, and he doesn't have, all he has is his weapon. So he has like a sniper rifle. So he jumps up, point blank range, shoots a guy with a sniper rifle, and then jumps back to the hovercraft before it drives away.
Yep.
And it didn't even kill him either. He was just
No.
like he was just almost dead.
Yeah. And then he jumped down and was chasing after the hovercraft. That was hilarious too.
Yeah, because there's like a mechanic where they like build up, right? Like they can't do their powerful attack until it doesn't matter, but they eventually they can. And with those guys, it was like they were trying to get their bomb lit. And so
So
he finally got his bomb lit, and then we were driving away. So he starts running after us, trying to blow us up. But
yeah.
one of the Rippers did get onto the hovercraft, but we very quick, as soon as he did, we were like, he's on the hovercraft, kill him
Yep.
immediately.
Yep.
So we dispatched him.
Yeah.
I used my I used my two-fisted punch. So that's one of my special abilities, and so it was very appropriate. Like this big giant gorilla eye jumps on, and I'm just like, and then he goes down.
Yeah.
But
every time you say two-fisted punch, I just imagine this.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if what else to call it. It's like the Star Trek punch, but
yeah. I now autocorrect for it, but it's still it's still stuck with me.
He's dual wielding.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, the fight went fairly well. Every turn, basically, all of the Gorillons on the cliff faces that had a ranged attack just completely pummeled whoever's turn it was to be the guy that stands in front, because you know how the mechanics work. There's like this thing that moves around, and everything else being equal, whoever has that token is the preferred target. So a lot of these guys didn't have area attacks, so they were using single target attacks, and everyone was focusing fire on every turn a different guy, and just blowing through his shields and taking out a hit point. But fortunately, that token moves every turn.
Right.
So basically, they just went round and wounded everybody in turn.
which is kind of weird, but it's just, yeah. I mean, yeah. And that is one thing about the mechanic is well, I guess it kind of makes sense. Like if you're going to be without cover, it's better to be with multiple people in non-cover. Unless there's area effects, then it's really bad.
Yeah, you use each other as cover.
Yeah. I mean, practically speaking, they wouldn't attack people one at a time, but whatever. It's just the mechanics have to be deterministic and also maintainable, and that works. It works out pretty well most of the time.
Yeah.
So.
And it was an interesting and fun fight, I think. So yeah, even though suboptimal things happened, that's fine. They were memorable suboptimal things. I'll always remember that poor suicide bomber frantically running after the hovercraft after it's gone, with his fuse burning down. Yeah. Anyway, so
there was some debate about actually as we drove away, some people, at least Chumley and maybe Yoon, were like, we should go back and kill the stragglers.
Yes,
so like,
we have to go kill the survivors.
It's not like we don't even know like exactly what's going on.
Yes.
My character Hawking told Chumley that that wasn't logical, and I know that he was having an emotional response to this situation, but you need to think logically instead. And it's funny because Robin was not feeling well, and the combat hadn't gone well, so both the player and the character were kind of in a bad mood. So she was just like gave me this stare of death, and said that she hit me, but I don't know if that really happened or not. But
so after a successful combat, the party then moved on down the ravine further, and spotted in the distance an entranceway to some kind of structure.
Mm.
So they pulled to a stop. They were quite some distance out from it. And they did a bunch of discussion about how they wanted to approach this thing. Because they were like, well, we could try sneaking up to it. We could try going around behind it, which doesn't really make sense because it's a cliff face in a ravine. There is no behind it, but they were kicking around various options. Eventually they sort of, I tried to kind of gently hint to them that, you are a distance away, but you drove up to it in a nuclear powered hovercraft. If there's anyone in there that's keeping watch, they probably know you're here.
That nuclear powered hovercraft, it keeps a bit of noise.
Yeah, it's a bit noisy. There's a little bit of a giant plume of radioactive dust that follows it everywhere it goes. And
just a small one.
Just a small one, yeah. So anyway, after a great deal of discussion about how to approach things, if I recall correctly, Flint Daniels simply walked up to the door.
Mm.
Yeah,
Said,
he decided that he wanted to. I mean, everyone kind of agreed that we wanted to at least try to approach with diplomacy in a way that we could just run away if they shoot at us from that cannon slot.
Yeah,
and of course, Flint is the right person for that. So
yeah. And he also decided enough talk, time to actually go. So yeah, Flint Daniels decides enough talking, time for action, because Space Ranger. And so he walked up to the door, and a gorilla up in the gun slot up there basically called down to him to halt and state your business. And it was all gruff and guardy and stuff. And then while they started going back and forth, someone started unlocking and opening the door, and the gorilla up in the gun slot was all like, wait a minute, no, don't. And the rest of the players were like, oh, they're like our party in there. Nobody knows what anyone else is doing.
The guy up in the cannon is Chumley, and the guy opening the doors is Flint Daniels.
Yeah. So yeah, the door opened, and
that gorilla with 2 rocket launchers is the doctor.
The doctor, yeah.
And then the romantic interest for this campaign showed up.
Yes, basically this sort of monkey cat hybrid thing. So yeah, this monkey cat comes out the door, and Flint Daniels immediately goes, "Space Princess?" And yes, indeed, it is a space princess. This is Chen. She is a diplomat starborn. And she immediately launches into a let us converse, let's reason together.
Although I have to stop you because the horror, which is the hands for feet.
Well, I mean, it's a monkey, so of course there's hands.
Yeah, it's funny that's like the most important part.
What is she holding in her hand?
It's supposed to be a tricorder, but I don't think Stable Diffusion exactly knew what a tricorder was, at least not in the model.
A quadcorder because it has to be legally distinct.
So it got close.
It does not look like a tricorder.
It's blue.
Looks like something else. Right.
Anyway, it's meant to be a tricorder. I thought it got reasonably close. So yeah, she basically is like asking them, who are you and where are you from? And the party's asking her like, and what's up with you? And they basically exchange the story so far. The party is like, we're not from the Suppression Pact. We're just sort of, we're here to. I don't know what they said.
Well, she was like, "We know you're with the Suppression Pact," and we were kind of like, "Well, kind of." So it's true they invited us here.
Yeah,
but we don't necessarily like trust them. And of course, Flint was very clear to say, "I'm a Space Ranger, and Space Rangers are not about suppression." So the Suppression Pact is already like, they were on the sus list from the beginning. He didn't say it this way, but. that's, that was the gist of it. And
Yeah.
so he's like, he made it clear he was interested in hearing other opinions. I mean, he did make it clear he's against the Baobabs. The
Yeah.
Baobabs, Baobabs are bad, destroying planets is bad. Mind snakes that take over people's minds are bad. He's like, straight up, those are bad. No, I'm not, it's like non-negotiable.
Yeah.
But being part of the suppression pact, only because they seem to be against the Baobabs and we don't even really know anything about them. So.
And she responded that yes, indeed, Baobabs are very bad. And regretfully, she had to admit that yes, her people had created them and were sending them out into the galaxy. And so the attack that was happening on this planet is kind of justified. But once we sort of sorted out, both sides sorted out that this was a non-hostile encounter, she suggested, okay, how about we take this inside the bunker? Because I'm soaking up a lot of rads out here from that hovercraft of yours. Let's take it inside where there's some shielding.
Did the party have radiation suits so they could ride their hovercraft?
The party did have radiation suits, yes. She didn't, but yeah.
So she invited Philip Daniels back to her place. And the rest of us as well. We all went inside.
So they went into the main entrance of the thing, and inside this bunker, it's a completely different environment. It's very green and lush and well lit and nice. It's a desert outside, but in here it's sort of feels jungly. And the Gorilla that had been up in the gun port comes rushing down and with like an honor guard sort of thing, and they try and stand there all guard-like and stuff. But Chen is very like, I'm a diplomat, so it's my job to face danger too, just like you. So, back off, let me do my job. And they were grumbly about it, but they were okay. I think she was really hitting a lot of the similarity points with Daniels there, because Daniels is also like, I'm going to be a danger diplomat. I'm going to go and stand out in front and
and of course, I mean, and basically Chumley is, I'm sure, doing the same thing. As I mentioned, Robert wasn't feeling well, and by this time she was feeling so not well that she just went and laid down. But I'm pretty sure if she had been sentient, Chumley would have been basically doing the exact same thing that the Gorilla were doing, like, not trusting this place and being very careful. So
I bet that Chumley and those Gorilla are going to do that sort of grudging warrior respect thing that aren't we just best friends now? But we'll see how Robin handles it next session when she's conscious. So anyway, so Chen described them as warrior starborn and herself as diplomat starborn. And there were also technician starborn. And I definitely woke Robin up so that she could see the technician starborn, because they are even more monkey cat like. And she just is like, oh, adorable, awesome. So yeah, I had another picture of one there. Where is it? Anyway. So a bunch of the technician starborn were around as well.
Yeah, everyone thought they were so cute, but I saw something cute and I immediately kind of panicked, because I'm like, those are the guys who are going to wake up and they're going to have mouths full of horrifying teeth, and we're going to wake up and they're going to be all on top of us, eating us.
They were chattering away in techno battle. The universal translators were having some difficulty with the techno battle, but they were very excited. And they sort of like, were tugging on Chen's sleeve and like, like that. And Chen's like, can they go out and have a look at your hovercraft? You really want to go have a look at your hovercraft? And the party was really concerned about them going out there and getting radiation poisoning and stuff. And I'm like, actually, you can overhear some of their chatter. They're making bets with each other about who's going to soak up more rads from exposure to that thing. So they know what's up. You've got dosimeters, and they're making bets about what their dosimeters are going to say after all this. So So
They
the party
understand the
also-
risks. There was also a brief moment where we're like, well, they could like disassemble it or destroy it, and then we wouldn't be able to get away. And then we realized if they don't want us to get away, we're not getting away anyway.
Yeah.
They could already do that. They literally have a giant like gun that could just, the only thing that's stopping them from blowing it up is that we could have ran away, but it's just sitting out there parked. So
Yeah.
there's nothing they can do. There's nothing bad they could do to it that they couldn't have already done anyway. So
Yeah.
And it's not like it's a technology that's more advanced than their technology. So
No. So yeah, the party's like, okay, yeah, you can go out, and so they're like, yay, radiation.
it's sort of like, someone with like a tank, but they find someone who made a really cool bow. And it's like, whoa, that's a cool compound bow. Let me check it out.
Yeah.
But it's not like you're gonna like, it's not like gonna put your civilization ahead 100 years or whatever.
So anyway, Chen took them into a meeting room. Basically was like, yeah, Q&A, ask me anything. So they had a bunch of questions, and she had a whole bunch of answers. She really info dumped the heck out of this because I'd built a conversation tree and the party explored every branch of the conversation tree. They've exhausted her information nodes completely. She explained that she and the other various primate-looking things are called starborn. They are basically animals that have been uplifted by the true intelligent species of this planet, the starflowers. The starflowers are a vegetable-based intelligence. They were once members of the old galactic organization way back in the day, 1 million years ago. Back then, they basically cruised around the galaxy in giant organic starships that they grew around themselves with crews of starborn. When they got word of Leviathan coming with the Epiphany, cognitohazardous weapon, whatever that is that they're doing, it turns out they are particularly susceptible to cognitohazardous effects because of how the starflowers communicate. They communicate in a method that transcends language, which unfortunately means that they're wide open for hacking, I guess. And so they were particularly concerned about the Epiphany. And so the starflowers sided with silence in the War of Silence. Chen mentioned that there were two different factions came up with fundamentally different approaches for how to deal with Leviathan. And silence was basically, they concluded that Epiphany somehow turns people into energy. And they figured if they could prevent Epiphany from spreading, then Leviathan wouldn't be able to gain enough energy to blow up the core or something like that. It was a little bit unclear. They're making guesses based on partial information. But that was basically the gist of the silenced sides on this. But the starflowers didn't want to do hostilities. So they just basically retired back to their homeworld and shut down their space program. And we're like, we're going to go silent. We're going to go pastoral and primitive and not interact with the outside universe. Hopefully everyone else will do the same. And then when Leviathan comes through, no one will be listening and no one will be noticeable and everything will be fine. And it's not exactly turning out that way. The galaxy's full of chatterboxes that are running around, forming interstellar civilizations and flying around in their spaceships, exploring. And so they panicked and decided to put a stop to all that and created the baobabs and the mind snakes. Basically their purpose is to go out and destroy civilizations to save the galaxy. more specifically to save their civilization.
If everything's quiet, no one will notice us.
Exactly.
And we previously established, and it was confirmed that basically like the baobabs are like android versions of the starflowers, and the mind snakes are like android versions of their.
Yeah. Chen was very very sneery and like, you know, they're a vile perversion. They're a mockery of Starflower. You know, they're like basically zombies.
Mm.
They made a zombie plague that was made in their image. It's terrible. So yeah, Chen's very against it, and her Starflower is very against it. Her Starflower is named Twilight Sage. And yes, yes, Shannon made many jokes about Twilight Sparkle too. I had two options to go with on the name, and I picked that one after much reluctance because I knew people would make that joke, but it a completely different reason why. Anyway, whatever.
You should come to me for naming advice. You remember, like the leader of the Elvish tribes.
Yes, Elven word.
Yeah, master of naming.
But anyway, so yeah, she was Twilight Sage is very much against the mind snakes and the baobab trees. Unfortunately, he's kind of been outvoted, and in fact, he's like sort of a lone voice of reason against the other starflowers doing this awful thing. And so as a result, he's kind of isolated and exiled out here. He doesn't really have much influence with the rest of the Starflower civilization. But he's keen to talk with the party. And if they're trying to stop the baobabs, he'll probably be willing to help them out. Yeah, the party started asking some questions that Chen didn't know the answers to. More background on because she mentioned that there were two factions way back in the day. And this is the first the party's heard of there being another faction, aside from the ones that went with the War of Silence. But Chen didn't know anything about that. But she's basically invited them to come and talk with Twilight Sage directly. And that's about where the session ended.
Mm.
Yeah, the only other thing I can think to mention is there was a bunch of asking about like, would a starflower take over the mind of a sentient creature?
Right, I forgot about that.
Like a mind snake would, and of course.
Yeah. She started talking about starflower biology and how that all worked, and Flint Daniels just immediately was like, "Oh, I could get a seed stuck in my head." And yeah, because he's all about this, you know. Interspecies contact and commonality and all that. And yeah, Chen was a little taken aback by that, but was basically like, yeah, the way it works is over the years, they plant a seed, the starflower plants a seed in the brain. Over the years, it grows and slowly replaces the brain over time, you know, sort of a ship of Theseus thing going on. And making the host more intelligent, more capable, and then eventually, once the brain has been completely replaced, the creature is no longer a star born, it's a star bright, and they are ready to actually go out and germinate and become a starflower. And Chen is a star bright, so she was just like.
One thing that was brought up too is that like so first off, the creatures they're implanting are animals, so they aren't like really sentient. It's not like they're taking over sentient beings, they're uplifting animals. And so, I mean, they've been genetically engineered at this point, but still. And then secondly, it grows in the way of your existing neural pathways. So even though it's replacing your brain, it's not like it's still using. It's replacing your way of thinking and your consciousness, but just with an enhanced version. So it doesn't like take over your mind like the way a mind snake does.
Yeah, it's more like a very gradual upload. I guess you could say. It,
So
it mimics the existing pathways.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm quite sure that Flint is, like, ooh.
Medical officer's log. Um, well, this is very fascinating, medically speaking. I've taken a lot of great scans. These aliens are so enmeshed with organic plants. It's all in their brains to varying amounts. But it's very fascinating. But I do wonder about Flint. He's asking some questions that may lead me to worry about him.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by these Starflower and Starborn guys. They seem nice enough. I wonder why the Suppression Pact people called us here to deal with them. I mean, clearly they're having some sort of conflict and they thought we'd be on their side, but from what I can tell, these plant people seem to be on the level, even though they did make the baobabs, which are bad, but they feel bad about it. At least these guys do, which instills a bit of trust, as long as they don't seem like the type to force a seed into my brain. If they do, I will fight. I don't want a seed in my brain, and Flint wants a seed in his brain, and I'm going to advise against it.
Flex officer's log. This entire planet is fascinating.
Flint Daniels log, Space Ranger. Even as the stars shine in the inky blackness of space, so hope sparkles even in the darkest of situations. Though of senseless wars obliterating the ancient civilization that once ruled on this planet, and the sinister forces of the Silence seek to silence all friendship and amicability and spirit of exploration, even in this place, I have met the most exquisite creature, and what I have always longed for, a meeting of minds.